Hello, history friends, and welcome to this first AP World CRAM session as we start to get ready for the AP exam. And we've called this a CRAM session because, that connotes intensity, which is what we'll have, but we are far away from cramming. In fact, we don't even know when the AP World exam will be exactly yet. Next time we get together next week, we'll know that, but the dates the College Board floated have all been right on. Have all been a little later. Hi, Sarah. Excellent. It's nice to see you here. I think there's a couple students at least from my class that I noticed live, and you all should put this on the socials so we can, bring the folks in. So my name is Mr. Beckman and Eric Beckman. Eric, come on. At Fardosa, right on. Fardosa, there are at least 2 Java images that I have here that I thought of you when I dropped them into the slide deck today. So it's been really a great day getting ready for this. I dug out several things that are pertinent, like this camel saddle that students got me one year, best gift ever. Hi, Juliana. Also, camel themed, my copy of Cotton, Climate, and Camels, which my family thought was a bit odd, but here we're going to be talking about it. So, a lot going on here. I think I can tell from the chat that people are out there bumping around. We have more people in the stream now than for some of the other ones we've done, which is great, and there should be good energy. So just know that the best bully it right on, Mr. Little. You can drop questions in the chat, and then people can respond to each other. It might go faster than I can see, but we have Mr. Little in the chat. I don't know if Mrs. Longnecker's out there. She joins some of these, and they can help answer your questions. 2, in and out, no pressure. I'm just saying that other people besides me might answer questions in the chat. I know that you have little ones and it's like still the afternoon there. So now so these questions about the exam that like Dan just dropped in there, we really don't know anything, and we'll know a lot more on Friday. So I've taken the topics for the 10 topics we're doing, and I'll show you in a little bit how I've divvied them up, but I picked a skinnier one for next week on Tuesday, because on Friday, the College Board will announce some of the things like the date, I think, and also the format. And so then we can have some extra time on next Tuesday to kind of chew on some of these things. The things that we do know right now are the exam will be all free response. I think we can safely assume that you'll have to interpret some documents, because right now, like 80% of the test involves students looking at a primary or a secondary source. So I think we can safely assume that you'll be asked to do that. You would not be able to do a few full DBQ, but you might be able to do kind of a mini Q, if you will, or a short answer question to do that. No, William, I'm going to explain in a minute. I didn't start with the global tapestry. It's kind of my way of I don't know, just doing the right thing here. But actually, I think Harrison's idea on the DBQ makes some sense. I'll explain in a minute why I'm starting with Unit 2, and it's not just because I didn't necessarily like the changes. I think it's good actually for you to review in a different order than how you covered this stuff the first time. So if your teacher went Units 1 through wherever you were when school stopped, that's great. There's like pros and cons to covering this stuff in any order, and so don't worry about that. All right, I feel like we're good here. Let me show you a little bit about what's going on. I'm going to switch. I'm going to make me little and the slides big, and then we'll do it. We got a half century of people here. Let's roll. There you go. So that's me. You already know that. I know Harrison. Couple here. So this is our weekly calendar and for Eastern time. And so I know some of you are in other classes. What other APs are kids taking? I know some of my kids I teach at my school are taking Lang and Stats and Psych. Those are pretty common ones. Bio is a beast, William. I mean, like, buckle up. That's what I have to say about that. It's good stuff. Right on. All right. Yeah, William Henry Harrison there. So, but on Thursday, the regular stream for this week in history is going to be on global migrations. And that's going to be one of the topics that gets a little bit shorted in what I have done with my program. So it'll be a good one to tune into. James Zucker, Mr. Zucker, is going to be doing that. He's a high energy guy, and I imagine that'll be pretty entertaining. So I can recommend that. And then every Tuesday at 11 Central Time, noon Eastern, we have a Q&A session with star student Jed, and I can recommend that. Jed did very well on the exam last year. So yeah, you should be getting reminders. Juliana, did you get a reminder email for this? Okay, yeah, so that's going to be the plan. And I think in the future, I might even include some things that you might do beforehand. So this week, I'm going to write like kind of the next step in the study guide. So if you got that study guide, which is linked down below, it talks about how to review this global, expanding interaction stuff. And then next week, I'll do the same for the next stuff on increasing production, which is more interesting than it sounds. Yeah, okay. We have a question in here about downloading CRAM sessions. I don't know if Tan is still in the chat. So, yeah, thank you. This is going to be a great time. I'm really excited about this. I do see some questions here kind of related to some general things. So I think I'll answer those, and then we'll kind of roll ahead. These are recorded, and it'll take a few hours because we have to download them and upload them. But by tomorrow morning, they'll be uploaded, and you can look at any of these past streams. So I have a link here to one that Mrs. Longnecker did on travelers in the Middle Ages, which is terrific, and I think would be really good review because it cuts across some things. You can do that. So these will be recorded, and I don't know if you need to study 7 through 9. I think it for the test, but it's good to have covered it. So that's a good situation. That's a good thing. So I wouldn't necessarily study it. The slides should be linked. If not, I'll email them out afterwards. Okay. I don't know if they are linked, but I'll email them out when we're done. So let's take a look at some stuff. So this is Fiveable. You should think Fiveable. Follow them on the socials. I'm a big tweeter myself, so that's where you can find me. But I understand these other platforms offer some value as well. Whenever we do a stream, or whenever I do any kind of history teaching, I always like to start with some kind of document. Tan's got our back. There we are. And that's the study guide. So if you take a look here, this is from before our time period. So our time period is going to start here at 1200. Whoa, not yet, although you do have the Bactrian camel there, Jason. So we'll see. So what does this tell us? That this was on a temple on the island of Java, which is circled there, around 800 CE. One way you could think of it in terms of a short answer question is this going to be evidence for a continuity, or will it be evidence for a change? So 800 CE, we have these ships here. Change. Now, it depends, right? So do you think these were brand new? Oh, caravels would be changed later. So it all depends on what you're comparing it to, right? I was thinking continuity, but you're right that you can make the students who are saying change are, right? Now, Dan has what I was thinking, which is not, I mean, there's always going to be more than one way to do it. And that's going to be one of the key things that I talk about with you, is that whatever you know, you can fit it into whatever. Yeah, like Emma and Dan are saying, we have this continuity that even before the classic Indian Ocean time period, that there's obviously a lot of travel going on, But if you're to look more closely at the ships and compare 800 with 1600, well, the boats are going to look a lot different. So that would be a difference. So you can always find both things, right? And also feel free to toss some random, or non-random Java facts into the chat too. It's always going to be good. All right. So here's what we're going to take a look at today with that image in mind, and that is we're going to make I'm just going to kind of tell you a little bit what my plan would be in terms of what I'll help you do in terms of reviewing. And then with each of these streams, I'm going to identify some power vocabulary, and that is terms that it is worth memorizing. Now, one of the things, these are all going to be operational terms, the kind of words that show up in free response questions, the things that are in the STEM that you need to identify examples of. Here's the thing, if you're feeling nervous, this might be reassuring. There is no fact in world history that is essential to doing well on the exam. None. What is useful is to understand the vocabulary that the questions are written in. So some of those terms are actually more important for us to dig into and maybe put on flashcards than, say, all the different examples. Like a person might know nothing about the Indian Ocean trade and still do great, even though the Indian Ocean trade is extremely important, but you can find examples from the other trade networks. Alternately, there could be a student who only knows about Indian Ocean trade, and they also do terrific if they can analyze the questions. Okay, so then we'll look at some of those exchange networks and finish with some comparison. All right, just keep dropping the questions in there if you have them. If you type a question in the chat too, it'll ask if you want to put it in the other thing. So let's take a look at the plan. I have 3 top study tips that I have represented here visually for you. What do you think? Those notes are from a student in my class. She sent me the picture today. So shout out to Izzy from 3rd period. The basketballs, right. There we are. There's really nothing wrong with a little bit of balling. Okay, right. So I have 3 ideas for you. And the first one is, right, the tortoise image there, and you're already doing that. Like we're 6 weeks out from the exam. So doing a little bit occasionally over a longer period and then intense at the end, that's the way to roll. And so simply by being here, you're already doing the first one. Yeah. Yeah, I would love that, Sarah. Okay. And you can see Izzy has underlined some of these notes, and she's already annotated them some. And what I would suggest then is she might even go on top of that as she gets ready for the exam and maybe turn each page into 1 or 2 words. So notes on notes is one of the best, learning strategies. And if you're ever in a college class or a high school class that's extremely difficult and you're having just trouble, and maybe AP World was like this for you, but maybe not. You might bump into a class where you're just like barely hanging on every day in class, taking notes on your notes that night. But now taking notes on these notes is going to be useful. And then the last thing is, as somebody mentioned up in here, repetition practice, right? So somebody like Steph Curry, how did he get so good? Well, part of it's genes. His dad won the 3-point shooting competition and his mom was a championship volleyball player. But part of it is like the rule of 10,000, 10,000 shots. He's probably taking thousands and thousands of threes. So there's really so you want to practice. And what I want to tell you is that practicing is more important than memorizing, practicing applying things. So what I'm going to try to do is narrow the field of things. Right on, Elias or Elias. Narrow the field of things where you're kind of memorizing to these power words, and then you practice applying what you know. I'm going to organize these review sessions around concepts that cut across the units. Now, like I said, that's not meant to be a criticism of the units. Different teachers have looked at the units. They're new to us, but of course it's all new to you, in different ways. So I'm not taking any kind of a position on that here. It's not useful for students. This is an argument between adults about how the course should be set up. But honestly, reviewing in an order that's different than how you studied it the first time is a good way to review, because you're creating more connections then. So you want to create connections across the content. So for this time period, the College Board curriculum identifies 3 key concepts. So we kind of look at these, and then there's a few different things that we can do, right? Yes, it is, but and these things are still in the course and exam description. They're still there. And they changed them a little bit, but they're still there. And so these are main ideas that you can use to review across timeframes. So one of the reasons for me starting with what a lot of teachers call Unit 2 is to kind of just make that point that we can start with different things. And you'll also kind of see if we start with Unit 2, I think Unit 1 actually makes more sense. But it's actually good if you did it another way in your own class. So take a look there. So that's one thing to do, is to know these really well. And then this is where each of these words is important, because these are words that could be task words in your free response questions. So we'll take a closer look at those. Another way to do it, again, we're kind of thinking of weaving the knowledge. Another way to do it then is to think thematically. Now your class might have used, there's a bunch of different acronyms out there. I kind of use pieces, but never really stuck with it. What kind of acronyms did people use for these themes? Some of you all go with pieces. I know I saw that in the Facebook page for that. Ooh, Spice E, I like that. Yeah, I was really fond of Spice Tea because the meme possibilities, right? You know, I made this meme with iced tea saying, I want you to think, you know, thematically, like iced tea. Like I would do what he said. But that stuff's not all safe for work, and there's other things. Oh, septic. Nice. I like that. Did you make that up, Harrison? I feel like you might have made that up. Something you would do. Well, one of the things to think about, these are important in this way. The prompts will often ask you for to work inside one of the categories. So one of the ways that kids who know things can have trouble in the scoring is if their examples don't fit. And so you want to make sure that your example fits within the theme. And so one of the easy ways to practice, so we would do that on the key concept. The last one is productive capacity. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. So if you want to just, you know, that's like champa rice and chinampas and stuff like that. Yeah. Horse collars, more interesting than you think. Okay. So whatever you know, what you want to think, what you want to be able to do is put it in the right category. I think basically a lot of kids mostly know enough. Like if you're here at this thing right now, you're a serious enough student that in all likelihood, you know enough. It's just a matter of getting into the right spot, or you almost know enough, and just a little brushing up will get you there. So whenever you're studying, you're looking at your notes, you're like, oh, okay, which one of these things does it fit into? And of course, a lot of things will fit into more than one category. Yeah. Yeah, we have a classic one from the past, then I'm going to do a review one then. So the other thing in terms of sorting is to put stuff into the right category or the right time frame. So really, if you can get it within the right basket of time, you're fine. And so really anything you know, you just want to think like, what theme is this? What time might it be? All that. So before we go on to power vocabulary, I'm going to check the questions. We have that recorded. These live streams are about an hour, but people can go when they need to. Yeah. Great. Tons of answering questions there. Right now. Oh, okay. So Julianne is asking a question about the Indian Ocean. And we have on the replays, on the AP World page. Someone can probably drop the link to that on there. We have one, Patrick Lassiter, who's a great streamer. He's been an AP reader. He did the Indian Ocean stream last fall. And so I'm going to talk about the Indian Ocean here a little bit, but you might check that out. And yes, William, late medieval could be post-classical. Yeah, thanks. Melissa's got it there. Okay. Next Tuesday is the next one like this that's CRAM, but there's another free one for everybody on Thursday. All right. So those are some things there. The Indian Ocean, I would check that out. It's really important. My first ever Fiveable stream was on the Indian Ocean. Okay. This is my one thing that you might write down. This slide and the next slide are the two things you might write down. And of course, you can look at the replay tomorrow and freeze it and then do that. This is a research-based vocabulary model. And what I don't want to, oh yeah, it's like Frayer's like a person and it's like research-based and stuff. So yeah, it's a good way to go, but you don't want to overuse it. Like you get 100 of these things and then where are you? Like, you know, most people can't. Yeah, right. How many did you have to do, Dan? Like biology, man, that class, there's like a lot of flashcards possible. I'm going to recommend you do 4 here. 4, just 4. And you can do as many. Yep. Yeah, right. You can't do it too much. I'm really sorry that happened to you. But this would be one way to do it, where you write the definition in your own words. What are some examples? That's really great in history. You kind of see how it works. What's an example? What's not an example? Okay, so let's take a peek here. These are the 4 power phrases for this period. These are things that could come up, and being able to tell them apart will be important. To be able to take an example, something you know, whether it's something that's in stimulus, like for a document, if it's a short answer question, or like people were speculating a mini DBQ, and then taking the thing you're reading in the stimulus and putting it where it goes, or if, yeah, like that. Or if it's in the prompt itself and you have to come up with your own examples, right? The kind of things, yeah, that you would see underlined. So let's take a second here and just talk about each one. So exchange networks is a broad term that includes more than one thing. So here'd be a question, like a kind of short question would be, what's going to be part of an exchange network that isn't necessarily diffusion? How are those things? So diffusion happens over exchange networks, but what could happen over exchange networks that wouldn't count as diffusion? Diffusion will be, no, diffusion is disease. Disease is infusion, diffusion, because that's like the microbe diffusing. So yeah, war could happen over the routes of an exchange thing, yeah. No, okay, trading, right, Lily, Ahuva, yeah, right. So trading would be the big example that's going to be exchange, but not necessarily diffusion. Now, of course, trade can lead to diffusion, as we'll see. So the thing with diffusion is to understand that it's not the same thing as trade, but it might happen over trade networks. So diffusion is a concept, right? That's diffusion. Those tech can diffuse. Yeah, it's all right, man. Right, just like the spreading. Then these here, commercial practices, that's a phrase that gets used. So what's the root here inside of commercial? What is it looking for? Yeah, right. Yeah, okay. So practices means that things that people do to do business, to do commerce. And so you might be able to come up with a few of those examples right now. And this is a classic example where you don't need to know them all. You just need to know some of them. Okay. And then I think transport technology is fairly straightforward. And there's some really big examples in this time period that are real useful as evidence. So let's take a peek. I have got a little game here. All right. Hey, welcome. Welcome, Ms. Littlefield. All right. So what would monsoons? So which of these two? So Dan L says monsoons, and Elias says Latin sail. Which one of those is a transportation technology? The monsoon or the sail? Oh yeah, it's coming. Yeah, okay. So let's take a look at this. So you have to figure out what it is. This is a classic AP history style question. The such and such could best be used to illustrate which of the following. All right, good. We got our things coming. So do you know what this is? And then which one of these things? It is a saddle. And what would you put this saddle on? Oh yeah. Well, there's like 9 kinds of camel saddles because there's the different hump situation. So I don't know what kind this would go on. It turns out the camel was domesticated later in history than other things because of sheer orneriness. Also, they're large. It's not an animal you want angry. So this shows transportation technology. Now, it could lead to all these other things. It could lead to commerce, although it's not a commercial practice. This isn't business. This just is a thing, right? It was used on exchange networks. It's going to lead to diffusion, but it best illustrates. Okay, I got a bunch of these. Oh, taking a look here now. Yeah. So now this, and I reused one and didn't use them all. So don't, is this showing, like, what is it illustrating? So again, if you see this, which category are you doing, right? So these are commercial practices, right? Because this is banking. So the rise of banking, like you think of banking as like, well, that's always existed. No, it hasn't. So the idea of banks would happen. All right, now this isn't Chinese though. Yeah, right. What are they counting in those houses, Darlin? Yeah. Yeah, and that's where the money is, right? You know, there's a story that someone once asked Jesse James why he robbed banks. You know what he said? That's where the money is. I think the person was asking why he robbed banks, but he was asking, why would you rob banks? Well, that's where the money is, right? So let's look at another one here. Uh-oh. You don't want the Yersinia pestis. All right. Because this could be the diffusion of this microbe. Do we know what Yersinia pestis causes? Yeah, it's diffusion, environmental diffusion. Yeah, it does. And I just want to take a second, since we have this, you know, we're all social distancing here and everything. There's a lot of talk about the Black Death. There's been a lot of new research on the Black Death. This is an aside now to what we were doing, but just as an aside. In the last 15 years, on the time you all have been alive, mainly, there's been a lot of research in what's called paleogenetics, meaning that as DNA processing technology has gotten better, research scientists working with historians have sequenced the Yersinia pestis genome found in the skeletons of people who died from the plague. And what they found out is that it was Yersinia pestis. And it hasn't changed that much, and it's still really deadly. Right. Now, this is different than COVID in a couple of different ways. Yersinia pestis is a bacterium. So meaning today, if it's something that you get diagnosed with soon enough, antibiotics will be effective. But this research with the genetic research has also really challenged this map. How many people have seen a map like the one on the lower left that shows the thing starting in China and then looping up and then coming across the Eurasian steppe? Yeah. Okay, it's real common. The real common map. And this is based on, no, it didn't start in China. Right. And so that tells us it tells us a few things. It tells us we don't always know. This map was done based on the work of an eminent historian, a really big deal, a guy named William McNeill, who's like kind of one of the fathers of world history, just a titan in the field. So it's not, and he would be happy to be corrected based on new evidence. Well, with these things, it's really not. Let me just back up. It's not like it started anywhere. Like the Yersinia pestis bacterium is older than Homo sapiens, probably. Like this life predates. Oh, it didn't come to us. We came to it. And the reservoir for Yersinia pestis is probably kind of right above where the O and the N are in wrong. Yeah, like human beings didn't always live in Central Asia, and then they did, and some of them got the plague. I mean, that's kind of one way to think about it. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. What the current scientific and historical thinking is that Yersinia pestis was living in what's today Tibet, the one that happened. So it's the G. And what we see here in East Asia and in Europe and Western Asia and into the Middle East was probably, those are different variants. That's how they know it wasn't the same. So it's kind of more like a big bang. Like that's what they talk about. And then it diffused out these different variants. They were quite deadly. All right. Also, that one of the things we're not so sure about, or I'm not an expert here, but is like how it happened, like why did that happen? Was this new variant just much more deadly? And then that's the variant that still kind of exists. And then there's a lot of unanswered questions. Yeah, with this. The other misinformation that's out there a lot, and Monica Green, who's a historian of disease, just pointed this out on Twitter, that in today's New Yorker, there's an illustration, which is a good magazine. There's an illustration that says that it's of the plague, but it's really of leprosy. So that's just kind of an aside on that, because with COVID-19 and everything, these things are out there. And it just tells us that we don't know as much as what we think. Yeah, this is not the Black Death. I mean, starters, and it's not what the text says. It's not like the illustration wasn't wrong. The text is about leprosy. This is apparently a text that's like, what do you do if if the bishop gets leprosy? And what do you do if a priest gets leprosy? It turns out if you're the bishop, you keep your job. That's what the text says. But if you're just a regular priest, sorry. All right, let's take a look at another picture here. Anyone recognize this? This was dug up from a shipwreck, a little bit of the old maritime archaeology. I think here, yeah, could be. It's not coins, although I mean I can see why you'd think that. Yeah, what is this? A rusted version of it is transport technology. It's not money, although it does look that way. Some coins had somebody, yeah, here we are, William, bringing from way downtown in Minnesota. It's Minnesota, right? Representing the North, indeed. So it's a transportation technology. This is an Astrolabe. Anybody in the audience in possession of an Astrolabe? Somebody no, right. That's what I'm talking about. No, someone had one on order who I know, so. Okay. Let's take a look at this. Fardosa, I hope you're still here, because this is Java again. So this is the island of Java, in Southeast Asia. Oh, sorry to hear that, Mr. Little. Another time. Yeah. So this. Yeah, so what is diffusing? This does show diffusion. Yeah, what kind of culture? Yeah, what kind of religion? Zeroing in. Right. Okay. So it comes there. So here's how diffusion is different than trade. When like this images of Shiva and Vishnu started being used in island Southeast Asia, it's not like people from India got something in return. They didn't like leave Vishnu like, and come an avatar of Vishnu and come back with nutmeg. They traded something else for the nutmeg. And the Vishnu stayed. Yeah, Shiva and Vishnu. That's like that's a potent combination, is what that is. Like if my mortuary memorial is a hybrid deification of Shiva and Vishnu, I think I'd feel like I'd done something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yep. And this is something that the kids have taught me, the students I stream with. I'm specifically thinking of Jed, but I know other students have. Like, always read the description. Because if you just looked at that, it may or may not make any sense to you based on your family background. We'd have that. Right. Today, Indonesia is mainly Muslim, which diffused there later, but was Hindu and then Buddhist. And different rulers at different times use different traditions. Yes. So culture can diffuse. So we saw biological diffusion with the bacterium. And then here we see religious diffusion. So probably brought by merchants, but then rulers adopted the religion as a way to kind of glorify their brand. Yep. All right. This is the last one of this game, which is going great. So with any of these things, or if you look at this later, or if you look at the slides later, the thing to do is then to think of what would be some other examples. Yes, that's right. That happens a lot, literature and art to legitimize rule, Harrison. And so then whenever you see something like that, you might think, oh, I didn't know that. Like maybe your class didn't talk about the Majapahit Empire. That's totally fine. Don't even worry if you've never heard of that. Now it's not, it's interesting, but it's nowhere near essential. But then you might think, oh, what's another example that I can think of where people or rulers adopted religion expressed in art or literature in order to legitimize their rule? Right. So Dan comes with Khmer's. That's awesome. Exactly. Was saying, thank you. Like you wouldn't need to know all of those things. You just want to be able to apply the things that you do know. Yeah. All right. Are we ready for some exchange networks then? See what I did here, segue wise? Appreciate it. Okay. So the only text that'll be on these exchange network slides. But so for each one, we want to take a little look at what's the geography, like what's the physical, the environmental interaction. Then we're also kind of thinking what was exchanged and which societies are involved. So Indian Ocean, now this is, I know somebody mentioned in the question there, was it Juliana? That they hadn't talked much about the Indian Ocean exchange. So you get a little overview here. Then if you want to go back and watch Mr. Lassiter's stream, like I said, he's terrific. I think you'll find that rewarding. All right. So what's the big geographic environmental feature here, right? Yeah. We're connecting those people, right? Right on Fardosa. Yeah. Now, one of the things about this, we're bringing some societies in. We got this ocean here. So the monsoon winds, which I think are caused like physically, this would be a good like apes or, too bad there's no AP meteorology, but by the Himalayas being so huge causes this and creates these predictable wind patterns that shift. Now, in other parts of the world, like in the Mediterranean, the winds mostly come from the north, a little stronger in the winter, less strong in the summer, and the weather moves from east to west. If you think about the continental United States, where the weather moves from east to west, no, west to east, my bad. But it moves the same way most of the year with some variation. Well, this is different because it's seasonal. That's going to have some big effects. Monsoon winds are great because you can use them to explain lots of different things here. Okay. And then societies we have, one of the reasons why I started with this one is in the Global Tapestry unit with the College Board's Unit 1. A lot of you did. Oh, yeah, I like the Majapahit. The College Board's Unit 1, there's eight parts to it. And four of them, see that, are connected by the Indian Ocean. So Africa, the Islamic world, South Asia, South and Southeast Asia, and China. When you do the Indian Ocean, you can always bring China into it because they were networked into it. Even though there weren't any ships going from China all the way to Mozambique, but the products themselves were moving. Okay. Yep. Those are different. Yeah. I think you can straighten that out there. Correct. Thank you, Mr. Little. So we have this. So we have those different societies are all affected. And this is the reason why I wanted to do this stream first, is when we start talking about these societies, like in terms of the global tapestry or the different things, they're already networked in. So when I was teaching this and I started talking about China, it's like, well, we need to have talked about the Indian Ocean and the Silk Road so the kids can know how Buddhism got there, because Buddhism is a big part of what's happening. So we can see all these societies are already networked in. If we're going to talk about Africa during this time, as Fardosa noted, that's the Swahili Coast, and Swahili has words from Arabic and Hindi and Persian in it because of that commercial exchange, and products from there wound up in other places. So, Majapahit, yeah, Swahili is mainly a Bantu language. That's correct. And then that's basically what it is. Like most of the words in Swahili are related to other words in Bantu languages. And then there's other words that have come into it. So, yep. All right. So what kind of products are moving around here? Yeah, right. Spices, right on. What spices? Oh, maybe not cola nuts. It's more West Africa. Probably lumber. Yeah, the nutmeg's from way over at the southeastern tip of this. We got that. Yep, gold from the interior of Africa is doing that. Not salt so much. If you think about this, salt is not as rare in the Indian Ocean world, right? And why? Why would that be? Why would salt be less valuable here than it is in North Africa? Where can you get salt? The Indian Ocean. It's full of salt. So salt, not so much. Cola nuts, I think it was more West Africa, but these other things are, yeah, right on, Emma. These other things are more true. So Indian Ocean, we have that. Yeah, cloves. And this stuff traveled. There's a historian, another great Twitter follow, Medieval Indonesia. There's like recipes from Ireland in the 1300s that call for like a pound of cloves for like a banquet and stuff. So this stuff is traveling over large distances. Now, most people weren't eating cloves, right? So what's coming in and out of, well, a lot of Middle Eastern people are the merchants. So that's like who's moving the stuff back and forth. There would also probably be some like, I think like frankincense and some resins from there. Think about that. So yeah, moving the products around. All right. Then I'll have a key visual object. Yeah. Textiles is really important though. So textiles is like always the answer to a trick question. There's always almost always an answer. Especially in this case, it would be cotton from India, much like my top. The pottery's not Swahili though. Kilwa is Swahili. This is one of Mr. Laster's favorite images. By the way, I took most of these slides from these past streams. Yeah, it is porcelain. So where's it from? So how did Chinese pottery wind up in East Africa? So porcelain is another trade good. Yeah. This would be before Zheng He, but Zheng He knew that he could go there to East Africa because this had happened. Although actually 1500, maybe it was on one of Zheng He's ships. I might have spoken too soon. Okay. All right, let's take a look at another image here. All right, now Zheng He. Where are we now? We've changed networks. This is a really famous image. What do you see in this? What can we dig out of? Like it's, when you do reverse Google image search on this, it's going to come up. Yeah, those are caravans. So then you should be able to narrow it down here. They're mostly not camels. There are some camels. No, it's not. It's not that. So since there are horses, all right. Yeah. All right. So it's important to say Silk Roads. It's also important to know that no one empire built these. That they're just Silk Roads really refers. It's really an expression that refers to lots of different routes. You can see some places where the geography affects things. We talked a little bit about camels. So the two-humped camel, the Bactrian camel, would be used here because it's more tolerant of cold. It's not as big, but sturdier. Yep, Eastern Asia. And then it's going to network into these other things. Some people consider the Indian Ocean trade between these regions to also be Silk Roads. Let's checking this out. All right, China. Things going across. All right, so there's desert here that's going to affect the routes. There's large stretches. In the study guide, I recommended another Twitter follow, which is Tong. Yep. Connecting these things. And so the region that's really important is this middle region here of Central Asia. So some of those Central Asian places. Because remember, like with the Indian Ocean, this is a relay trade. Very few people, except for some famous travelers, are traveling the whole distance of it. Merchants are mostly going kind of back and forth between different stops or 2 or 3 stops. Yeah, Marco Polo would be. And one of my big recommendations is, if you're to watch one other thing after this, is let's say is to do one of 2 things after this stream. One of these areas, you might have been like, oh my gosh, we never talked about that. I don't remember, or maybe you were sick when that came up, or, that was a snow day, or, I know y'all don't have snow, but here, that's a real deal. There's still snow in Minnesota, by the way. Some places. Oh yeah. What about the Mongols? This is an excellent question. But my top tips for watching another replay that would go along with this would be to either something where you felt kind of weak, or to take a look at Mrs. Longnecker's Travelers stream, which I linked below, the replay, because it builds on those connections between regions. Yeah, well, really with the Mongols, it's redeveloping. The Silk Roads, again, is going to be continuity. This goes back to like way before, more than 1,000 years before 1200, that there's products moving back and forth. So it's about they'll fall into disuse and then they'll come back like that. Okay. All right, somebody guessed this before for something, but if you see this picture here, what might this be? And then what kind of yeah, the Black Plague the Black Death would have slowed commerce down. Wouldn't have shut the Silk Roads down. Again, these are just paths. Like they're not going anywhere. They're still there. People driving Jeeps and riding camels and donkeys on some of these paths, like right now. All right, that's right. It is. Emma, I was just going to ask you to explain what it was, and then you were typing it while I was thinking. Thank you. So this is another great example, piece of evidence, because it would be hot and windy and dusty. People would want to get into an enclosed area. Really, Zane? That is fabulous. Where on the Silk Road? I love it when we put the world in world history. Okay, yeah. In that photos of the Silk Road Twitter account, there's pictures from Pakistan sometimes. They're really beautiful stuff, yeah. Okay, now somebody mentioned the Mongols. I didn't make this meme. I think Jed did. I'm not really totally sure here, but it kind of shows the spread. I feel like Pax Mongolica is kind of it just seems like a misnomer to me. But so Temujin took the name Genghis Khan, and he would have united this. Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah, well, you're gonna be back next week, Zane. You should share that with us. It'd be fun. So conquering this large area. So the Mongols, like on the one hand, the Mongols would have been bad for commerce, like in the short term, because they destroyed so much stuff. So it's really one of these like paradoxes. But in the long term, they created like a unified area, right? Over time, it made it safer. Like one of my favorite primary sources that I've come across, there's a primary source from a Daoist, the assistant to a Daoist monk who Genghis Khan summoned to his camp in Central Asia. So Taoism is like an old Chinese philosophy. And Genghis Khan summons this monk to come and teach him, and he just wants to talk to him about like the nature of the universe and stuff. So Genghis Khan, like the thinking man's brutal conqueror, I guess. So the monk gets there. Okay, yeah, exactly. That's how Dan go with the flow. Some of you probably talked about this, some of you probably didn't. But the interesting part of the story for this is the monk shows up, and then Genghis Khan's like, I'm going to be gone for 6 months because there's some bandits in the mountains nearby, and I'm going to go set them straight. And I'm reading this source, and I'm thinking, I'm glad I am not the bandits who, like, Genghis Khan cleared his schedule for 6 months to deal with. And I kind of feel like if I was a bandit on the Silk Road and the Mongols come through and they're against banditry, I might, like, look for a different line of work. So, yeah, right. But, you know, you want to, this is one of those things where you can show complexity. You know, we'll talk a little bit about complexity as we get closer to the test and know what the heck's going on with it. But the thing with complexity, you know, is to show both ways, you know, because the Mongols also, they trash a lot of places too. I'm going to skim through these slides because I don't want to, like, so what's going on here? So this is Baghdad. What do you think happens to Baghdad after the Mongols, like, get done with it? Yeah, there's a sacking involved, right? It's not just there's a siege and they get sacked. Yeah, and the Mongols, like, according to their kind of warrior code, they weren't supposed to kill leaders from other communities, or they weren't supposed to shed their blood. So instead they, you know, rolled the caliph up in a carpet and had his body trampled by horses, I think. So it's like, whoa, again, you don't want to be in the way of this. So Baghdad had been a major trading city. So what's this going to do to trade? It's going to be bad for it. So the Mongols, it's kind of both things. Yeah, right. So in the short term, it's going to disrupt trade in those areas. But in the long term, those Mongols, they're in favor of, right, they're in favor of commerce, and they don't really care about religions. So religions are going to spread across those areas. Okay, so you want to again kind of think, you're kind of thinking of the complexity, the both things. Cool. All right. I like this map for Trans-Saharan. It's not a trick question, but what's the key geographic feature here? Yeah, right. So what are we going to be talking about again? Yeah, but you're going to want that Arabian camel, which can handle the hotter temperatures. It's going to be the taller one-humped your Arabian camels. Going back and forth. So the camel saddle is necessary for that to happen. People were, you know, again, these networks still exist. There's people taking jeeps and donkeys and camels, are smuggling stuff across the desert like right now. I mean, it's tomorrow in Mali, so it's underway. All right. Now, the salt and the gold is the big exchange here, but one thing I like about this map is it shows you that the gold is kind of outside of the core areas of those West African trading kingdoms. And so it's really, and so is the salt. It's that the exchange is happening there, right? So there's some pretty famous examples that you can use here for Trans-Saharan networks. Of course, anybody do a little Mansa Musa in their class? It's good stuff, right? Coming in, yeah, right? There you are, right? So that's a great example of a lot of different things. If you think of our pieces, like Mansa Musa is political, because he's a leader, right? And he's and it's economics because there's the trade, right? Cultural, what cultural diffusion happens across these networks? That's super important. Yep, comes in, right? Well, the northern part of Africa is predominantly Islamic, right? So you kind of like draw a line from like northern Nigeria across like that. So you have that. So you have your culture. I mean, there's not as much social stuff in there, but you pretty much have the other things, the technology with the camel saddles. Okay. So we have our societies here, and it's going to connect those West African trading kingdoms. So this is primarily going to be Africa, but the gold that traffics through here winds up in Europe, and it winds up in the Silk Road, and it becomes the currency that kind of lubricates this whole thing. So you probably learned about silver in the next time period. That, the silver trade from the Americas is the next time period, like after 1450. But so the gold from Africa plays a similar role here. Tanya, it is nice to see you. I knew you'd be livening up the chat. So the gold from Africa is going to get into the Mediterranean, up into Europe, into Eurasia, right? Yeah, I mean, I think there's some truth to that. Yeah, no worries. You can watch the replay, Tanya. We'll see you next week. And Mr. Little is saying that. I think it's important to note that like all religions are syncretic. Like at the end of the day, you can find those things. But yes, you can talk about how, Ibn Battuta mentions how West African Muslims aren't following practices that he considers Islamic, like veiling women. Although veiling is pre-Islamic too. Yeah, there you go. Okay. One more here. Oh yeah, the Djenne. It is, right? It's exactly where it is, Fardosa. Yeah, Djenne is near Timbuktu, but it's different. But the architecture would be similar, right? So again, this would be an example of diffusion. Here's one of the best maps that a lot of history teachers like that kind of brings all the things we've talked about together with extensions into Europe and China. You can see how it's all connected. Now, the College Board does not list, so those are the exchange networks that the College Board lists. The Indian Ocean, Silk Roads, and Trans-Saharan, plus the Mongols as part of the Silk Road story. Yeah, right. Oh, you have a question. Right, haram. Restrictions, right. Yeah, I know what you mean. Did I not answer your question, Zane? Or maybe you're responding to another student. That's cool. But I think it's also important, and Mr. Little's taught me some things about this, about how, the harem, not haram. Yeah, Vardosa likes to correct my pronunciation. Appreciate that. It's good though. I can stand it. In any case, no, women were not secluded in West Africa. So women were very much part of the marketplace and things like that. That's one of the things that Ibn Battuta thought was haram. But so we can look at these exchange networks are happening in the Americas too. So you don't have to know that necessarily, but anything, even if it's not included in the curriculum, if you do know it, like let's say you want to talk about one of my favorite historical objects ever. I know. He did, yeah, that. Hey, a fun fact, I've met Nelson. He wrote the Mongol chapter. Yeah, Strayer Nelson. It's not that big of a deal. Like he goes to conferences. You seen this thing? I love this thing. Yeah. But we have as Mr. Little pointed out in the stream this came from, we have these different things. So this is an Aztec thing, and it shows, that the materials are moving around in the Americas too. That this kind of exchange is not just happening in the, it's not just happening in Afro-Eurasia. That stuff's moving around in the Americas as well, and ideas are happening, and you see continuities, and there's road building, especially the Inca roads. All that stuff's going on. No, it's turquoise. Probably from what's today the southwestern United States. would have been northern Mexico coming across, and then Tenochtitlan, Aztec capitals, Mexica capitals in the center of that. And so there's things from the coast. Those teeth are made out of conch shells, I think, like a big shell that you can put up to your ear and hear the ocean, although it's really your thing. So yeah, right. There's a lot of people, pre-Columbian Americas is like 1/3 of the global population, I think. So a lot of people. I might be wrong on that. Someone can correct me. There's a lot of people there. And there's still a lot of Indian people in the Americas. All right. We are now, that's 1 hour. So I'm going to take some questions. I do have like a practice question, which I'm just going to leave here and people can talk about and think about. But I don't want to go rambling too far over. I can get going. So I'm going to put the practice question up for people to look at and think about. 3 different parts that you could do. On Thursday, it's not me, it's Mr. Zucker, James Zucker, and he's terrific. He's real high energy, and it's going to be on the other end of the time frame on global migration in the 1800s. And I really recommend that one because that's one of the 10 key concepts, and it's the one that I folded into another one in my schedule for our streams here. So each of these streams, except for the last one, will be based on one of those key concepts, and then we'll be doing more specific kinds of practice as we get closer. So global migration in the 1800s on Thursday. So if we have questions here, you can do that. So your first one, you should watch whatever you think is important. This is the first CRAM, Zane, so we're going to be, you're fine. So you can watch whatever seems useful. 1 hour later on Thursday, Juliana, with Zucker. He calls himself Zucker in a way that's kind of amusing because, it kind of sounds like Zucker. So, yeah, he's great. That's going to be, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central, where I am. 5 o'clock on the West Coast. Anybody in Mountain Time? Sunny's here, right? Are you in Mountain Time? You are. Great. Thanks. Thanks, Stephanie. So whatever that would be, Mountain Time, then 8 p.m. Eastern. So that'll be good. But next week at this time, we'll be doing another thing from this early period. And what you could look at to answer Zane's question then is, I think I have, if you look down below in resources, I have a link stream. These are just for discussion, but the reviewed question that I'll give you feedback on, or maybe one of the other teachers here, if there's a lot of it. So the link here, so it says practice SAQ, that goes to a different question. This was just for discussion in this stream, but we've kind of run out of time. So you can look at this and do that. Hey, there you go, Tanya, number 1, that would do it. And then what I'd want you to do, if you look at Tanya's answer there, that's good. And then what you want to do is think categorically. So your overall statement would be that one similarity was religion spreading. And then you'd say, for example, Christianity and the Silk Road, Islam, and also on the Silk Road. So you get, you'd have to do Islam, Trans-Saharan, or Indian Ocean. But you'd want to have those, yeah, right. No, that's right. But the thing is to have that specific thing in there. All right, so I'll take a look at these questions that are in here. That if you click on the Practice SAQ big green button there, that'll take you to one that's about this topic we've done here. It's not this one, it's a new one. And I will give you feedback on that. And I've been an SAQ reader. I was an SAQ reader last year. Okay, let's see what we got going on. 7-9, I think we talked about that. Okay, to memorize dates or events. I think the only dates that you need to memorize, Arosa, are to kind of know what's happening to define those periods. So you should know which of those 3 time periods something fits into. I think if you know a few events, of course, that's good. You're going to need to know some events. But a better way to do it is to start with what you already know and then think of how you would categorize it. And then if there's a category, like a time period or a pieces, spiced tea category where you're kind of light, then that's something you might look up. The best thing to do would be to take a look at your own notes and kind of go through and think of how do they fit into these key concepts and then the time periods, and think about how they connect. It's hard to say. Everybody needs to know something to use as an example, but you don't have to know everything. So if like I was going through this tonight and you could think of other examples of the things that came up, I would say you're fine for that. And you should just keep practicing those connections. If on the other hand, there was a topic that came up, but you were really confused about, then I might write that down and look some things up. Okay. Yeah, live streams are about an hour. As you can see, we usually go over a little bit, but I'm slowing down here. So, all right. Is there a question I missed? Someone's asking, Dallin is asking about outside the time period. There isn't synthesis anymore, but you can use stuff outside the time period either as a kind of context or as additional evidence if you're showing the same kind of historical relationship as another thing. Yeah, Harrison's right. Well, Friday. But we'll get, as long as you make it, if you're outside the time period, if you make it clear to the reader that you know it's outside the time period, and then you're applying it to the reasoning that you're making, meaning if you say this was happening, let's say we got the global migration thing that's happening on Thursday is something that's closer to the present. So Zucker is going to talk about people coming from Europe as wage laborers, indentured servants, different things that are happening. You could talk about migration in the 1900s and talk about how it's either similar or different, and it kind of shows how the process worked, as long as you make clear to the reader that you know that it's not in the time period. Okay? Yeah, there'll probably be different versions too. Yeah, I'm guessing, I know Mr. Little's been speculating, a series, maybe a couple of SAQs. It'll be something like that. Yeah, I hope there's documents for two reasons. One, then there's not as much pressure to memorize stuff. But then also, so that's really what historians do. Historians never really work without documents. That's like why when I do these things, we're always looking at some kind of artifact with that. Okay, so the one thing you could do though, if you wanted to practice, remember practice is the best thing, and practice can take a couple forms, is to look through your notes and just kind of think about how things are connected. Like if you have a page of notes, like if you have your own notes, you're so far ahead of kids who don't. Go to a page of your notes, just find one thing on there. Like, yeah, but that's a trap. Open note is a trap, because if you're looking through your notes, then you're not writing. So, you want to know some stuff. But yeah, it's true. It's open everything. We'll talk about that more when we get closer. Right, exactly, Dan. Yeah, not enough time. But you can look up like one single thing. But what I mean is in terms of getting ready, you look through your notes, maybe if you find one thing on a page and you practice, can mean thinking about what it connects to. Now, the format on the SAQ that I have linked is just like last year's SAQs and the ones before. In fact, I modeled the language in the prompt on release prompt. So it's like, it's based on those things. They'll time you, Olivia. They'll time you. Yeah, I think if you have your notes near you, it's fine. Yeah, one per chapter. This is good. In any case, but even if it's not the exact format as the SAQ that we've had before and the examples that I'm going to put out for you, the moves, the intellectual moves that you need to make to answer the question, the kind of thinking that you need to do will be the same. So there will be the same kind of the same kind of thinking. Like if you think the SAQ really includes the building blocks for an LEQ or a DBQ. So if you can do that where you can identify, explain, or describe, those skills will be useful no matter what the thing is. I think for kids who get accommodations for time, like in the regular test, the same thing would happen here. And you should reach out. If that's a situation you have, be sure you reach out to somebody. All right. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. So the same thing should happen here for students who have accommodations for extra time. Yeah. And if you should maybe email whoever maybe what I might do if that's a situation you're in is email the AP coordinator at your school. It might be a counselor, or you could email your teacher and then they would know who that person is just to make sure. All right. Okay, I am going to say goodnight here, and I will see you all a week from tonight. This has been really great, and I'll make comments on your things, and I'll also probably lurk a little bit in the chat on Thursday with Zucker. So should be good. Yeah. So check those out. Thank you all very much. It's been lots of fun. Yeah. Right on. It's a good group. And broadcast. Good night.